The battle over the New Hampshire budget heads to the state Senate floor. Coming up this week in the Cloakroom. Hello and welcome back into the Cloakroom, a weekly video report from the Josiah Bartlett Center for Public Policy. I'm your host, Grant Bosse. It was budget week in the New Hampshire Senate this week as the 24-member chamber took up the state's two-year, $10.3 billion spending plan, passing it along party lines 19-5. In the end, the plan spends a little more than the House, much less than the budget proposed by Governor John Lynch. Debate centered around a number of floor amendments that would restore funding to programs cut under both the House and Senate plans. Senator Lou D'Alessandro proposed restoring funding to children in need of services and mental health support by maintaining a surcharge on motor vehicle registrations.
The idea is this. We take the motor vehicle registration surcharge and we delete it over the next 2 years. And we delete it in the first year and do away with it in the second year. In the first year, under this plan, it will produce $3.1 million. In the second year, it will produce $10.8 million. What we do is take the monies, restore the highway fund, take the general funds that were supplemented to the highway fund, bring them back, and use them to cover certain unfunded items that I think were very important in the budget process. Now, in the first year, this is what we fund. We restore the remainder of the House reductions to the adoption services. That's very critical because we do run into a problem if we don't maintain the adoption subsidy. We run the risk of losing some federal funds. We restore funds to the Department of Corrections. We restore funds to the Department of Revenue Administration because we have revenues associated with auditors. And if we don't have the auditors, then we don't get the revenue. That revenue is penciled in at about $40 million. Most of that money is generated by the out-of-state auditors. Each one of those has a number associated with them in terms of revenue produced. We can't lose that. So we restore to the Department of Revenue Administration $1 million. Then we restore the reduction to Alzheimer's and related disease caregivers. And all of us recognize the fact that if these caregivers aren't in place to give respite to those who are taking care of people with Alzheimer's and other related diseases, you know the problems that ensue and the costs associated with that.
If you put a $30 surcharge in place and you used it all for highways, you would have had massive, massive job growth in New Hampshire. Is it the right thing to do? It's $1 million tax on my home community. They didn't even know it. But now we're taking it and using it for other things. And I do have the same passion as Senator D'Alessandro. But I've been through it. We've been through the budget. I asked everyone when we got done this to come in with a different idea, cut something in the budget. I wasn't going to support increases in taxation to get there, increases in bonding to get there. You know, we talk about the Department of Corrections, how we cut so much. It's an increase. It's a 2% increase. I challenge you to look back to what they had in 10 and what they had in 11. I mean, it's growth when everybody else is shrinking. I mean, it's one department to point to, but I mean, it was hard enough to build this budget when everyone was receiving cuts, and probably the ones that took it on the chin more than anything because they were general funds of the university system and the community tech system, and we said we were going to look at them last, and there isn't anyone in the Senate that wasn't praying for revenues to come in higher. But there's a reality. And if we go and we put taxation on the same people that are telling us they can't afford it now, what are we doing? I strongly believe in the Senate President's comments. We need to live within our means. this would be producing more means. I don't think it's appropriate at this point in time. I still think you have to realize we haven't balanced the levy. And
Article 6A, registration fees and gas taxes go to the highway fund. Diversions are not supposed to happen. This body talks all the time about diversion, diversion. This is a diversion. We're here to protect that. If you want to fund these, put in another tax. But don't put in a tax that by the Constitution goes to our highway fund. I sat here over the last few weeks and heard about, well, this doesn't go to the highway fund. Not everybody realized registration fees are a part of 6A. They go to the highway fund. They need to stay there. We talked about diversion for years. Ad hoc committees, one committee after another. How do we stop the diversion? We believe safety should be funded from the general fund. We got $80 million in diversions from the highway fund. If you want to fund things, fund safety from the operating budget, not from our registration fees.
I do applaud the sentiment of this bill as far as meeting these needs, but there's a problem. And I think we're seeing this through many of these amendments. This is Keynesian thinking. And if we know anything about Keynesian thinking at the federal level, doesn't work.
We closed the Laconia facility, moved prisoners to Laconia, from Laconia to Berlin and to Concord. For those of you who have visited the Concord prison, and I'm sure some of you have, you know what it's like. So the increases were brought about because of court action against the state of New Hampshire. With reference to the diversion, I support my colleague's concept, but difficult times present difficult problems, and we've got to come up with solutions. This is a solution, a very temporary solution that does something to address needs. You can debate whether it's the right or the wrong thing to do, but one must do something. You have to do something. When you see a need, when you recognize the fact that dangerous children may be out in the community, that creates a need that has to be addressed. We've got to address it. There are 250 of these kids. There were really 500 of these kids. I looked at the Manchester school system. We have 16 of these kids in our school system. They cost us, or will cost us, $1.6 million a year if indeed kids aren't taken care of. So when you see a need, you've got to address the need. You've got to work on addressing the need.
D'Alessandro's amendment failed 19-5 along party lines. The Senate package reduces a number of small fees that were increased under the last legislature. Lebanon Democrat Matthew Hood suggested keeping the fees where they are in order to increase funding to family planning services such as Planned Parenthood.
What it would do is restore family planning funding, which is in this budget cut by 57% in 2012 and 64% in 2013. While my amendment does not restore all of the funding, even to the level proposed by the governor, which was already funded at a reduced level, these are important allocations that would not only serve people, but save money as well. Unchanged, this budget cut will affect not only Planned Parenthood health centers, but community health centers and community action programs across the state. For Planned Parenthood of Northern New England, it would mean the likely closure of one or more of its health centers now located in Claremont, Derry, Exeter, Keene, Manchester, or West Lebanon. But more than offices, this will impact people. Specifically, it will impact low-income women and teens with no other source of insurance. According to the Department of Health and Human Services impact statements, between 13,000 and 20,000 clients will be affected. I'm sure Senator D'Alessandro would want me to note that over 5,000 in Manchester alone. He's not here, but he would want me to note that. 1 in 6 women in New Hampshire now get their annual exam, including cancer screening, at a family planning center. In fact, 60% of the women who visit family planning clinics consider it their only source of medical care. Family planning investments are among the most cost-effective programs for saving state health care dollars. These programs provide much more than birth control. They offer cancer screenings, as I said, basic exams, and disease prevention. The average family planning visit costs less than $100, and the average cost of a Medicaid birth, over $11,000. Cutting off access to this basic health care will significantly increase Medicaid and welfare costs. These funds have been critical in helping New Hampshire reduce its teen pregnancy rate. We are now the lowest in the country, but the city of Manchester, and Coas and Sullivan counties still have teen pregnancy rates that are double the state average. But I heard the Chair of Finance yesterday when he said that there will be no new taxes or fees tolerated. So here's my plan. If you look at pages 90 to 91 of House Bill 2, there are sections starting with 309 that reduce fees. They reduce fees for things like the Rooms and Meals operator license renewal fee, transfers of animals and birds, condominium act application fees, marriage license fees. That's one of my favorite that we're reducing. So what I'm saying, Mr. President, is that my plan does not increase fees. It takes away the reduction of fees. We decided that that didn't make sense in other contexts, the cigarette tax. We didn't decrease that fee. The gas tax, we didn't decrease that fee. Let's not decrease these fees. And frankly, I think it's a small amount of money that's going to make a huge difference. It made sense in those other areas, and it makes sense here.
The amendment fails on a vote of 6 to 18. And next recognized, I think, Senator D'Alessandro for Amendment 2240.
Hood managed to attract one Republican vote, but his amendment failed 18 to 6. Also up for debate, Cannon Mountain. D'Alessandro suggested putting off privatization of the state-run, state-owned ski area, but the Senate adopted to put it out for bids, much like the New Hampshire legislature did to Mount Sunapee 10 years ago. The $10.3 billion budget now heads to a conference committee where House and Senate negotiators will hammer out differences between the two chambers, hoping to get the budget to Governor John Lynch before the June 30th end of the fiscal year. We turn to the results of our New Hampshire Watchdog poll. We asked about the budget, whether you thought the Senate bill was a good compromise, or if you favored the House or Governor's version. Here are the results. Finally, this week, we note with sadness the passing of former New Hampshire Governor Walter Peterson, the one-time Speaker of the New Hampshire House, served in the corner office from 1969 to 1973, overseeing sweeping reform of New Hampshire's business taxes. He also proposed a statewide income tax, drawing a primary challenge from future Governor Mel Thompson, spawning the pledge against broad-based income taxes and the famous saying, "Axe the tax." In the nearly 4 decades since leaving office, Peterson was a staple of New Hampshire politics, helping guide John McCain's presidential campaign to victory in New Hampshire's first-in-the-nation primary twice, in 2000 and in 2008. He was also a member of the board of the University System of New Hampshire and a fierce advocate for the state college system, and he was an active board member with the Josiah Bartlett Center for Public Policy. Our thoughts and prayers go out to Governor Peterson's family. His passion, intellect, honesty, and unfailing kindness and generosity will be missed. I'm Grant Bosse. We'll see you next week in the Cloakroom.